The West faces a new primary security threat today, on May 26, 2025. This danger does not originate from external aggressors, as was often the case historically. Instead, the most significant challenge now stems from within its own borders, the rising prospect of internal civil conflict. This represents a profound shift in strategic understanding for many nations. For decades, Western security establishments primarily concentrated their efforts on countering threats from other states or international actors. Now the focus must pivot decisively inwards. Acknowledging this uncomfortable new reality is absolutely essential for safeguarding future stability and maintaining peace within these societies. The warning signs are increasingly evident and demand immediate, serious attention. Scholarly literature and current analyses paint a concerning picture regarding this internal threat. A Western country exhibiting the known preconditions for civil war now faces an estimated 4% chance of such a conflict occurring in any given year. While this annual percentage might appear relatively small at first glance, its cumulative effect over a slightly longer time frame is substantial. Over a 5-year period, this risk escalates to an 18.5% probability for a single nation experiencing these vulnerabilities. This is not a distant, abstract, theoretical problem. It is a statistical likelihood derived from observable current trends and societal pressures, underscoring the urgency of the situation. The potential for conflict becomes even more pronounced when considering the wider regional context. If we assume that at least 10 European countries are currently facing these predisposing conditions, the outlook becomes considerably more alarming. The probability of civil war erupting in at least one of these 10 nations within the next 5 years is estimated to be as high as 87%. Should the number of vulnerable countries be closer to 15, this probability shockingly rises to 95%. Furthermore, the interconnected nature of Western states means that conflict is unlikely to remain isolated. There is an estimated 50% chance that a civil war, once ignited in one Western state, will spread to others, creating a devastating contagion effect. Certain nations are often identified as being at a particularly heightened risk of experiencing violent civil conflict sooner rather than later, with Britain and France frequently cited in analyses. However, it is crucial to understand that similar dangerous conditions and underlying tensions are present across much of Western Europe and also within the United States. A powerful and deeply felt cause contributing to these volatile situations in many instances is the perception of downgrading among former majority populations. This sentiment, characterized by a feeling of losing cultural centrality, social status, and political influence, can breed profound resentment and create fertile ground for deep, intractable societal divisions. One of the most significant drivers of this increasing internal fragility within Western nations is the phenomenon of culturally fractured societies. What were once perhaps more cohesive societies, or those with established and effective mechanisms for integrating diverse populations, now find themselves grappling with deep and often bitter divisions. These fractures commonly manifest along lines of ethnicity, religious belief, or fundamental clashes in core values and worldviews. When this essential common ground erodes and different segments of the population begin to view one another not as fellow citizens but as existential threats, the very fabric of society weakens considerably. This makes the outbreak of violent conflict a more conceivable outcome. Economic stagnation serves as another potent catalyst, further exacerbating these existing societal tensions and grievances. When economic opportunities diminish and significant portions of the population experience prolonged financial insecurity or feel left behind, discontent naturally multiplies. Issues such as stagnating wages, persistent unemployment or underemployment, and a conspicuously widening gap between the wealthiest and the poorest segments of society create a pervasive environment of frustration and anger. This widespread economic malaise can then be easily exploited by organized groups seeking to challenge the established political and social order, skillfully channeling economic anxieties into broader anti-system movements. The actions, and indeed the perceived inactions, of political and economic elites also play an undeniably crucial role in fostering internal instability. Instances of elite overreach, where decisions appear to disproportionately benefit a select few or consistently ignore the legitimate concerns and needs of the general populace, breed widespread cynicism and deep-seated distrust. This erosion of faith inevitably leads to a significant loss of public confidence in normal political processes and established governing institutions. Consequently, a growing number of people may begin to feel that the entire system is rigged against them or is fundamentally unresponsive, making them more receptive to radical ideologies and extra-parliamentary forms of action. This pervasive loss of faith in established systems creates a dangerous opening for various anti-status quo groups to gain traction and influence. These groups, often skillfully tapping into the aforementioned cultural anxieties and economic grievances, may come to realize the significant potential they possess to disrupt critical national infrastructure. Modern Western societies are incredibly dependent on complex, interconnected systems for energy supply, digital communications, financial transactions, and physical transportation. These vital systems frequently possess inherent vulnerabilities that can be targeted. The potential for relatively small yet highly determined groups to cause widespread societal disruption through carefully planned attacks on such infrastructure introduces a new and perilous element to the strategic landscape. Future civil conflicts within Western nations may not conform to traditional models of warfare, characterized by clearly defined armies engaging in conventional battles. Instead, a more likely scenario involves the emergence of what some analysts term feral cities. This concept describes major urban centers where the legitimate government progressively loses its capacity to maintain the rule of law and provide basic security for its inhabitants. Such cities could become defined by pervasive high-level political corruption, the existence of no-go zones where police authority is either non-existent or heavily negotiated, visibly decaying public services, and crumbling essential infrastructure, creating an environment of endemic disorder. Indeed, many major Western cities are already exhibiting some of the troubling precursor characteristics that align with this feral city model. They may be moving towards an amber, marginally feral, or even red, actively or incipiently feral status. Tangible indicators include unsustainable levels of municipal debt, the quiet emergence of two-tier policing systems where different communities experience vastly different standards of law enforcement, and a burgeoning private security industry catering to those affluent enough to afford personal protection. These concerning trends are widely expected to worsen significantly within the next 5 years, rendering urban environments increasingly unstable and exceptionally difficult to govern effectively. Compounding the alarming issue of potentially feral cities is the presence of a growing and often intensely hostile political divide between major urban areas and their surrounding rural hinterlands. Large cities, frequently characterized by greater demographic diversity due to differing patterns of migrant settlement, often possess starkly different political outlooks and cultural values when compared to the more traditionally minded populations in the countryside. Critically, the essential life support systems for these sprawling urban centers, including natural gas pipelines, electricity grids, water supplies, and major road and rail transportation routes, are often geographically located in or must transit through these very rural areas, making them highly vulnerable. The likely trajectory of such internal conflict could therefore see major cities becoming progressively ungovernable due to escalating internal strife. This urban chaos would inevitably stretch and potentially overwhelm police and even military capacity, primarily focused on containment efforts within city boundaries. As a result, systemic political legitimacy would likely plummet across the nation, and the wider economy would be severely crippled by intercommunal violence, mass displacement of populations, and the breakdown of commerce. In such a dire scenario, indigenous populations residing outside these feral urban centers, perhaps perceiving them as effectively lost to what they consider a form of foreign occupation, might then be tempted to launch direct attacks on the exposed and largely unguarded city support systems to precipitate a catastrophic systemic failure. Given the inherently devastating nature of civil wars, the overriding primary strategic objective for any Western government facing such a prospect must be the maximum possible limitation of damage. Historical data clearly shows that civil conflicts are notoriously prolonged. The median duration for such wars between 1945 and 1999 was a staggering 6 years. They are also exceptionally bloody, accounting for an estimated 16.2 million deaths during that same period, a figure 5 times greater than the fatalities from interstate wars. To illustrate, if a nation like Britain, with its current population of approximately 70 million, were to experience violence levels comparable to the worst year of the Northern Ireland conflict, this could translate into around 23,300 deaths annually. Preventing such catastrophic outcomes is paramount. A crucial yet often overlooked aspect of any comprehensive damage limitation strategy involves the proactive protection of cultural capital. Civil wars are frequently characterized by deliberate acts of iconoclastic vandalism, as well as the systematic looting of irreplaceable cultural infrastructure such as museums, national archives, libraries, and historic buildings. These destructive acts are rarely random. They are often strategically motivated, intended to demoralize opposing factions, erase cultural heritage, provoke further violence, or even to fund the ongoing conflict. Therefore, robust pre-conflict planning must include meticulously identifying, cataloguing, and prioritizing vulnerable cultural property, preparing for the secure removal and storage of movable artifacts, and developing plans to guard significant immovable sites. To effectively mitigate the horrors of mass civilian displacement and the associated loss of vital human capital, the establishment of designated secure zones is an essential consideration. These would be clearly defined geographical areas where a semblance of normal civil life could potentially persist, albeit under conditions of diminished danger, and be capably defended by loyal regular forces. Such zones would necessitate strictly controlled access, well-managed systems for humanitarian aid distribution, and the maintenance of essential infrastructure including functional airports or seaports, reliable power generation, clean water supplies, and stable communications networks. Pre-conflict identification of suitable zones and extensive stockpiling of necessities would be vital preparations. Finally, and perhaps most critically, Western defense establishments require a drastic and fundamental reorientation in their prevailing mindset and strategic planning priorities. Military commanders, many of whom possess valuable experience from past involvement in insurgency and counterinsurgency operations abroad, must now urgently formulate comprehensive strategies specifically designed for potential civil conflict scenarios within their own nations. This may necessitate actively seeking clear political directives to authorize and guide such sensitive planning. The danger of internal conflict is no longer a remote possibility, but a clear and present threat. It is absolutely essential to overcome any normalcy bias, and for statesmen, the concerned general public whose unease is valid, and especially military leaders, to recognize this internal threat as a primary defense concern, acting decisively to prepare and, wherever feasible, to prevent the worst eventualities.